So, what do you think of this romantasy trend that is now kind of taking over the world and seems to be sweeping the nation?
So again, like this is one where I was on the bleeding edge, right? So, and I think what I'm not sure. So for my own journey, right, why I lean into this is, um, I remember I started out being either romance or horror novels, right? So like, kind of, so almost into this kind of fantasy, right, type of stuff. And then over time, as I read, that there started getting books that were coming up that started touching on fantasy, such as, the Fae or, witches, there's all the kind of the genres and the subtext. And I realized I really was drawn to the fantasy side, science fiction side of it, right? And they're some of my favorite movies, right? So if you
Yeah.
also think about maybe the last 30 years, there's been some incredibly strong fantasy science fiction that in the general population are like if you think through, it's all blockbusters, right? So I think that what happened is that as that the fantasy, right, or and also the
Mhm.
science fiction started becoming such a strong um basically topic trope in movies, that you started seeing this trend, right? And remember, a lot of this started with the whole vampire thing, which is by itself a fantasy, right?
Yeah.
Because, right, so you really came out with Anne Rice with Interview with a Vampire, right? And then, going into kind of some of the vampire type
Yeah,
books,
like the Twilight
Twilight
series.
series, right?
Yeah.
So I think what I saw happening right in there is that I saw this transition from the horror, right, or more of that
Mhm.
that dark fantasy, werewolves, vampires, witches, to true just fantasy, right? And I do think it followed, the Lord of the Rings. I think it followed a lot of that coming through. And then for me, what it does is it creates worlds where women can be way powerful, right? Like when you start putting in this whole the fantasy part of it, you get women who are just as kick-ass as any guy, right?
Mhm.
And
Or
it
just as evil.
and just as evil, right?
Yeah.
And it puts women in an equal footing with men, right? That's really what I see, is it puts women in an equal footing. And I just am drawn to that because we know this. There's not that women don't have as many of those kick-ass, like I'm as strong
Yeah.
as men out there. And I think these series really allow you to have these very, very powerful heroines that own they own it. They're it. They're
Yeah.
the power right behind. They're the power. They're not a power behind the throne.
Yeah.
And I
I hadn't
think,
thought about it that way, but you're right. And the fact that they're very cinematic or lend themselves to that kind of
yeah,
storytelling. I
yeah,
mean, like you think about, of our age, right? Who would have been a heroine like that? Ripley in Alien,
yeah,
right? So to your point, starting in the horror genre and moving into this direction, it's a pretty cool
yeah.
development.